Waiting for the little symbol. Okay, so that is now started. So today we wanted to have the opportunity to discuss some of the different financial pieces that have been coming our way, that are coming our way. And so I asked our fabulous project manager, Jill BriggsCampell, if she could spend some time with us, walking us through the sea of new acronyms that we're all navigating through and what they mean. And, maybe we can have a dialogue about implications for students with disabilities and special education as a result. So we also have Jen Perry with us, who is one of our special ed financial analysts available to join the conversation. I was hoping we could just take a couple minutes if folks would who are on the call, if they could maybe introduce themselves to Jill. Just let us know who you are. It would be nice to be able to put a face to the icon or a voice to the icon.
Jackie, you may need to call people out.
I might. I'm seeing Jen. I'm seeing Jen blinking. Jen or Chris or Paul. And
hey, this is Vicki Wells, Addison Central.
Yay, Vicki. Wonderful.
Way to be brave, Vicki. We've already just established that Paul's not shy.
So sure. So that's okay.
You want me to talk about something, Jackie? I can talk about a lot of stuff. Hi, Jess. How are you?
Hi, Paul. Hi, everybody. It's Jess Henderson. I'm sitting in for Pam Reed from Rutland City.
Nice. Fantastic. Awesome.
Well, Jackie, would you mind
Jill,
sharing?
I'm going to turn it over to you so we can get started, since all time is precious commodity for so many of us. So let's get going. So if you want to share your screen, I will monitor the conversation, and also I will mute myself.
That sounds great. Thanks, Jackie. So hi, everyone. Very glad to be introduced to this group of folks. I know that you all are super busy and facing a tremendous amount of work. So I appreciate you giving me the time, and hopefully this will be a useful session for you. What my role has become at AOE is the Federal Emergency Funds Project Manager. Not the job I signed on for. I actually started March 16th of last year. That was my first day. I was supposed to be the continuous improvement and results-based accountability manager, which still is my job, but as we very rapidly started receiving these funds, first the CARES, CRF was part of that, ESSER, we'll talk all about those, the alphabet soup of programs. Very rapidly my work shifted over to that. And then in addition, I'm on the COVID response team. So I'm on the team that leads the school COVID surveillance testing effort and the vaccine effort. So I'm wearing many hats these days, and they just seem to be adding more, which I'm sure you're all doing as well. So Jackie asked me to come and speak to all of you folks about the federal emergency funds, sort of what we've received, what all the different acronyms are, who gets what pots of money and how they can be used. And then also sort of opening up a conversation at the end around recovery planning. What do we think is coming? What do we know is coming? And also to collect questions from you all that I can bring back to folks that are working on the federal emergency funds to identify like what are questions that we need to answer for you. So that being said, I'm going to be sharing a PowerPoint, and I will pause at certain points and ask for questions, but if you do have a question and you want to throw it in the chat or raise hands, Jackie and Alex are going to let me know since I won't be able to see. So Bear with me for 1 second while my computer slowly decides to open. Okay. Can folks see my screen with the title page?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, thank you. Okay, so COVID-19 federal emergency funding overview, and you already know who I am. So we're gonna start way back on March 27th of last year with the CARES Act. And this is probably the one that you've heard about the most. It includes what we now call ESSER 1, Gear 1, and CRF, which is the Coronavirus Relief Fund. So it had 3 big buckets of funds within it. In addition, it had some funding for like childcare and child nutrition and some other pieces, but what AOE was handling was these 3 buckets. So I've made a couple of family trees because I am a visual learner and I do best when I can see things laid out. So here's the beginning of our alphabet soup. The good news is that all of these acronyms will carry all the way through. So once you've got them down. So the one that you may have heard the most about is ESSER. It's the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund. It came through the Department of Education based on Title I allocation methods. It's not tied to Title I, but it's based on those allocations. The funds went directly to LEAs, and then there was a set aside for AOE. So in total, it was about $31 million, 28 million of that went to LEAs, and 3 million is what's known as the SEA set aside. That's the money that AOE has available to identify and address sort of statewide solutions to help support the field in their COVID response. The period of performance for this goes 9/30/2022, so it's got a long tail. It's got a pretty broad range of uses. So it includes, importantly, anything that is allowable under ESSA. So IDEA, any of the title funds, Perkins, all of those allowable costs are folded into an umbrella. And then there are, in addition, there was 12 other categories of costs. So very broad. No supplement, not supplant, was attached to this. Although if you were using it for, say, like an IDA allowable cost, then that would apply. And importantly, and I'll touch this in a second, it also had equitable services. The second bucket was the Governor's Emergency Education Relief, or GEAR Fund. Also through the Department of Education, it went to the governor's office, and it was available for either like K through 12, institutes of higher learning. It has sort of a broad range of what it could be used for. The AOE made a proposal to the governor's office identifying that CTE centers are independent CTE districts, and then the CTE centers attached to LEAs had basically fallen through a funding hole, and so they were not getting any support. And so the governor decided to prioritize those funds, and AOE has administered this grant. So it was about $4.5 million. Again, had a pretty broad range of uses, and also goes through 9/30/2022. Okay. And then the last bucket of funds was the CRF fund, and this was different. It came through Department of Treasury. It went to the governor, and then the governor decided to have the legislature allocate these programs. And so it was used for a huge range of programs across the state through many, many state agencies. But for AOE specifically, we ended up administering 5 different grants, totaling about $103 million over 2 acts, one that was passed in late June and then another that was passed in September. It had a much more limited range of uses, although still, you know, a pretty, you know, you had to meet certain requirements. It had to be very specifically COVID related. And then the kicker on this was that the period of performance was very, very tight. It had to be used by December 30th of 2020. It got extended, but when we were operating these grants, that was the deadline. So we stood all of these grants up in September, and they were, done by the 30th of December. So it was a very, very rapid pace. So I'm going to jump into just a little graphical chart for you to visualize these funds. We did also, as I indicated, receive some child nutrition support, much smaller amount, and we'll talk about in the next round of funding, there is more support for child nutrition. But within CRF, we identified some child nutrition support that was needed as well. So I'll speak to that in just a moment. I've already kind of highlighted these, but you'll have them for reference. So what is ESSER about? It goes to the LEAs. This is the piece I had signaled. It did require equitable services to non-public schools. So the provision of services and goods through a process of consultation. The applications for ESSER are due on March 20th. So, a few days away. About half of the LEAs have submitted their applications and half have not. So it's going to be a very busy week for everyone. When I had originally created this slide, which this was for a legislative presentation, so back in January, only 11 LEAs had approved their grant awards or had approved grant awards for only about a total of $7 million. And this caused a bit of consternation. But what we were explaining to the U.S. Department of Ed and also to the legislature is that because of the very, very tight timeline for CRF, it was really important that recipients of CRF focus on those funds first. And so now they've pivoted towards ESSER 1. And here's just a summary of GEAR. The GEAR grant goes from July 1st, whereas the ESSER grant goes all the way back to March 13th of 2020. So it's a backwards looking as well as a forwards looking grant, very unusual in that way. And Ruth Durkee over in Student Pathways has been running this grant and has all 17 CTE centers have approved grant awards, and they're using those funds right now. And then here's just sort of another highlight for the CRF funds and how those got split up. So as I indicated, there was 5 different grants that we ran through AOE. The largest of these was the LEA grant. We approved about $73 million in LEA grant funds. A good chunk of that ended up being not used. So we actually had asked for more from the legislature, and then we ended up returning about $15 million of it. And I'll talk about where that went. We also had the summer food service program, which was a very short run. It went from June through early September when school started. The approved independent school grant, which was just about 1.2 million. We had a second child nutrition grant that was the child nutrition equipment grant that allowed our school food authorities and some of our child care centers that run meal programs to purchase supplies and equipment to be able to serve meals, since they're doing it in dramatically different ways. And then the indoor air quality grant, which is the IAQ. This is run. It's administered by AOE, but it's run through Efficiency Vermont, and this is for HVAC systems to improve air quality. It started out as only a $5 million grant, but the need was so great that we were able to get more funding for it and then take some of the unused LEA funding and put that into it. So it ended up being 18 million. And we still have about $15 million in unmet need out in the field. And so what we did when it turned out that the CRF grant was going to be extended an additional year, which we'll talk about in a second, AOE recommended that our unused $15 million be put into the indoor air quality grant so that Efficiency Vermont can continue to do their work. And they provide the these subgrants to LEAs and independent schools, approved independent schools. So what we've identified is that there was many, something like 50 schools that didn't even have a mechanical HVAC system, in addition to like the upgrades that I'm sure you all know exist, and there's a real need for them. So I will pause for 1 second. This is the CARES Act. Any questions on this bucket of funding? And Jackie, I'll let me know if there's any questions.
No questions in the chat, just requests for the presentation, and we'll be sure to make this available to our directors.
Okay, we will forge ahead then, and your eyes will glaze over very soon. Okay, so the next round of funding came in on December 27th of 2020. And it has a horrifyingly long name, but we just call it the CARISA Act for shorthand. And everything's going to look familiar here. You've seen these acronyms before. So we have now an ESSER 2, a GEAR 2, a GEAR EANS, which is a new animal, and an extension of the CRF fund for 1 year. So it now goes to 12/31/21, so December 31st. And then some very specific child nutrition programs. In addition, it included a whole host of other programs, including funding for broadband, increasing broadband access that are held by other agencies. So I'm just focusing on the AOE buckets, but there is other money out there as well. So I made a new family tree, the CARISA family tree. So as I said, we've got an ESSER 2, again, US Department of Education, goes directly to LEAs. The deal here is that ESSER 1 was about 31 million and ESSER 2 is about 126 million. So we saw a huge increase in the amount of funding. That includes $114 million to LEAs, $13 million set aside for AOE. Same broad range of uses as ESSER 1, with a specific emphasis on measuring and addressing learning loss, and then also sort of calling out an allowable cost that was present in ESSER 1 but wasn't specifically mentioned, and that was sort of upgrades to facilities in order to meet public health guidance or whatever may be needed for in-person learning. So that was sort of specifically called out. This ESSER 2 goes an additional year. So the first one was 9/30/2022. This is 9/30/2023. So again, it's got a long tail. It's a multi-year grant. The headliner for ESSER 2 is that it does not include equitable services, and I'll talk about where that went and ended up. GEAR 2, same thing. In total, GEAR now is just over $6 million. GEAR 2, which is basically just an extension of the GEAR 1 program, is just under 2 million and set up exactly the same way. The governor has not yet identified a priority for this. We've made a few proposals. He is waiting to understand the budget picture as the budget is making its way through the legislature, and then identify basically like who's fallen through the cracks that needs support, or is there a targeted intervention that we need to do. Where equitable services ended up is basically a new program was created. It's called the GEAR Emergency Assistance for Non-Public Schools, GEAR EANS. And if I was going to shorthand it, which I should do, essentially what they did is they took the burden of equitable services that sat on LEAs and they moved it onto the SEA. So AOE is now tasked with essentially running an equitable services program, totaling about That says 4.8. That's a typo. It should be $4.2 million. My apologies. And this also goes through 9/30/2023. So in fact, right before this meeting, I was hustling to get some communications out to the field around this. This is a brand new animal for us. We've never done anything like it, so it's been a challenge. And then, as I said, the CRF fund was extended through December 31st of 2021. I have a typo there as well. Apologies. And as I said, we propose to move the funds into the indoor air quality grant. So I'm going to sort of breeze past this a little bit because I've basically summed it up. There is a substantial set aside for AOE, again, to sort of look at statewide priorities and statewide supports for addressing COVID needs in the field. And so the Secretary has sort of held that a little bit because there's a desire to not sort of spend the money just because it's there, right? To understand what it is that the field really needs and then offer supports to meet that need. The ESSER 2 funds must be tracked separately from ESSER 1. I've talked about the extended period of performance and no equitable services. The maintenance of effort requirement has changed slightly. I don't know if that's of any interest to folks, but essentially there has to be a proportional share of the state's support for elementary and secondary education as compared to its spending in other agencies. So this is important because there has been discussion about, well, the LEAs are getting a lot of ESSER money, we can short the ed fund that amount. And so we have been cautioning the legislature that they still need to meet maintenance of effort requirements that are in ESSER 2 as well as ESSER 1. And then there is a specific reporting requirement, which we don't know what it is from USAID, which is exciting for us. At 6 months, that the state needs to report on how it's using the funds to measure and address learning loss for student populations disproportionately affected by COVID-19, but we don't know what those requirements are yet. So that is sort of a big question mark for us.
Hey, Jill.
Jill? Yes.
Sure. A couple people just wanted to just talk about that it sounds like no funds are being set aside specifically for special education. Any needs in that area would come under ESSER. Is that correct? So a couple people wanted to know that.
Yeah, that is absolutely correct. And so we'll talk about what that means sort of strategically for special education directors and sort of the fiscal and strategic planning. So I'm almost through this boring part and then we can get to the good stuff. Okay, so we've talked about the GEAR Fund and how it's broken down. We've talked about the GEAR Fund key points. I'm going to cruise past these. And so we're now to the good stuff. So how can CARES and CARISA funds support special education and the recovery plan? So I'm hoping that at this point, folks on the call have heard of the recovery plan. This is AOE's sort of plan to help and sort of require LEAs to prioritize their needs to as we come out of COVID, right? So, you know, we're sort of at this stage where in terms of infection rates in school, we're in really good shape. The data is all pointing to that. Everyone's getting vaccinated right now, which is very exciting. And so we're really pivoting towards like, you know, how are we recovering from the last year and its impact on our students. And so what AOE has identified as the 3 pillars or foci, I use buckets, I think it just works for me, but the 3 pillars of the recovery plan are social, emotional health and well-being, engagement, student engagement and truancy, and those are seen as sort of truancy being one extreme end of an entire engagement sort of issue, and then academic success and achievement. So the first sort of guidance around this went out 2 weeks ago, very, very brief, and it sort of set the framework for what's going to happen. The sort of toolkits and planning tools for the recovery plan are imminent, like very imminent, but I know better than to give a date. But the field should be expecting to see these like any day. And the first sort of deadline is a March 15th deadline, which is the establishment of the recovery team and identifying a recovery coordinator. So the plan, and this is taken sort of directly from the documents, sort of the outline documents. So I'm not sharing anything that isn't sort of known. But establish a recovery team and a recovery coordinator, assess need at a local level using data readily available, create an action plan to meet that local need, which is the recovery plan, and this is going to be a required document. My understanding, no one is allowed to hold me to this, but my understanding is that the recovery plan is essentially going to replace the continuous improvement plan requirement for this year. And the intention at this point is that there's a recognition that this summer is like a crucial opportunity to start measuring first learning loss and then addressing it, or addressing social emotional health. So the intention is to get these recovery plans done this spring so that the work of it can start in the summer and even earlier. And then sort of refine the plan over time. And this is where like continuous improvement comes back in, the PDSA cycle of continuous improvement. So in terms of using ESSER 1 and ESSER 2, and this is the last slide, and then we can really open up the floor for questions. So as I indicated, anything allowable under IDEA is allowable under ESSER 1 and ESSER 2. It is definitely the intention of AOE that ESSER 2 is the primary source of funding for recovery activities. So as you're sort of looking at recovery and, oh good gracious, how do we actually do this? How do we pay for it? The answer is in large part ESSER 2. Although I would definitely, and we can talk more about this, I would definitely encourage folks to think about, you know, how do we use IDEA as well? You know, how do we use title funds or whatever it may be? There's 14 additional categories in addition to anything allowed under ESSA. And so I've highlighted just some of the ways that I was thinking in particular that special ed directors might be thinking about using ESSER 1 and ESSER 2. So hiring of additional staff to remote, hybrid, or remote or hybrid learning, hiring of additional staff to support in-person learning, because you may need to like reduce the ratio of teachers to students in order to meet health guidelines, purchase of adaptive or assistive technology to address learning loss, social emotional health, student engagement, purchase of data management tools to assess student learning. Also things like the administrative time to do that is also well under the ESSER umbrella. And then there's a whole range of other costs. So I'm going to go ahead and end the slideshow and open up the floor to questions. Thank you for bearing with me. I know that's like the driest of saltine crackers in terms of acronyms flying at you, but I hope it gives you sort of a scope of what's available now. And here's a couple things I can signal. Here comes another acronym, the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA, that is currently making its way through Congress and will most likely be signed in the next few days, contains what we understand at this point from our discussions with Peter Welch is it contains an ESSER 3. The ESSER 3, the last I had heard, which was a week ago, is about $250 million for Vermont schools, for LEAs. So if ESSER 1 was 31 million, ESSER 2 was 127 million, ESSER 3 is 250 million. So there is a tremendous amount of funding available. We don't have any sense right now of the period of performance on that. We have heard that they may be shifting equitable services back to the LEAs because I'm guessing that the states all went, we don't know how to run this kind of program. And we have heard some indications that there may be some like specific mandates on setting aside a certain amount of funds to like specifically address learning loss or whatever that may mean, and we don't know what that means at this point. But this is all to say more is coming, and so there is, within this really challenging situation, there is an opportunity in terms of this huge amount of unprecedented amount of funding to really think about, you know, what we can do in our education system, you know, sort of given all of these resources. It doesn't come with additional personnel to be able to manage all of the resources, but that's something you could hire. So I have just finalized a draft of ESSER 2 guidance. It's with the secretary right now. It has a detailed outline of all of the allowable costs and how you might use them. And the other piece that's in it is sort of, you know, we want you to be thinking about the recovery plan for ESSER 2. We also want you to be thinking about strategic use of these funds as non-recurring expenses. So I've highlighted a bunch of different ways that you could use these funds that won't set you up for a fiscal cliff later on. We have also established, just as something to consider and bear in mind, that one thing that could be done is if you identified that you needed, say, a new position, and that position was going to go beyond the period of performance of September of 2023, that there is no supplement, not supplant, if you wanted to then move that position into, say, your IDEA or your title fund or wherever that may be appropriate. So that is a transition that can happen without any consequences. So it is allowable to do that. I'm going to stop talking and allow you all to ask some questions at this point or share thoughts.
Great. Nothing's in the chat, but please feel free to comments, questions, concerns, thoughts of resources or investments.
So here's a question that folks could respond to. I guess a two-part question is, one, are you all being made aware of the recovery plan? And two, I know that in AOE, we are talking a lot about special education as a particular target, right? And a place that I think everybody knows there's a real need for support. And so I guess my second question is, if you are hearing about the recovery plan, are special educations being involved in those discussions? And because the question is, you know, how do we get these resources? We've identified resources for our kids. How do we get them? Well, you'd need to be at the table when they're talking about ESSER funds, right? And planning around that. So that's sort of a question for the field, I guess.
We do have a question from Katie.
Hi, thank you. That overview was really helpful. I'm from Windsor Southeast, I'd remember where I am. I am involved with the team working on the recovery plan, and one of the things that our business managers shared is that we couldn't use it for anything for special education. For example, so this is where I work the clarity. So we're going to run, we're creating our plan. We have this awesome summer program planned, regular ed, special ed, you know, we've always done ESY and things, but we've got this great scope. We're working on staffing, and we were told that special educators, anyone that would have fall under IDEA, just in general, special ed direct services, wouldn't be included. We're trying to team teach, not the official version of it, but having a special educator and a classroom teacher work to benefit all students within those classrooms for the 5 weeks we're planning. So can you be really specific about what special ed, what can be used? Are we allowed to pay special educators, the SLP? We're doing as part of that, I guess that scenario would probably sum it up. I would imagine many of us are in that same situation as we're trying to plan some pretty robust summer intervention.
Yeah, that is unfortunate because that is not at all the messaging that we have sent out. So I would encourage the business manager to reach out to our ESSER program team. And I can, so that's Josh Soulier, and we can put his contact information here because it sounds to me like that's a misunderstanding. Not only does ESSER allow you to do anything that would fall under IDEA, but we are encouraging especially extended year and summer programs. So yeah, and I think the ESSER 2 guidance I was just referring to that's in kind of final production right now sort of specifically calls that out as something that you could do. I think, Katie, that the planning piece here is, are you looking to actually you're looking to hire additional staff or pay them above and beyond contract, or?
It's the summer stipend. Any
Yeah.
teacher who works over the summer. So there may be, and we are thinking of some additional positions next year because of the significant loss, especially in our pre-K kids. But that's separate. This is clarity. And so many people have so many things heading their way that it's a lot to take in for information. And as you know, sometimes there's some pretty big silos between special ed funding and regular ed funding. So it may have, however it got construed, this is worth the weight in gold right now, for me to know, as we move forward in our plan. So we're going with the best information. So if you can send me the contact, I'm sure our business manager knows who it is too, but so we're all on the same page. That's fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just looking back at the document I drafted, and one of the specific things that we're calling out, Katie, as a good use of ESSER funds is additional payer stipends. The idea being that it's a non-recurring cost, it doesn't set up liability down the road. If you are looking to hire additional positions, then you'd want to partner with your business manager, right? How do we avoid a fiscal cliff? Can we move this eventually into IDEA, or should we put it into IDEA right from the beginning? You know, that's sort of what to work out. But costs beyond usual payroll, stipends, summer programming, that's actually a very specific thing that we're saying is a good use of ESSER. So yes, I will get you that, and then keep your eyes peeled. And Jackie, why don't I make sure that when the ESSER 2 guidance goes out, you can send it to the SPED directors directly, since I think that they need this information in hand, it sounds like. And you know, we sort of are relying on, it goes to the superintendents and the business managers, but as you said, information gets siloed. So that sounds like something they could really use.
Absolutely. A couple of comments. Robin says she's involved in the recovery plan discussions, but was not aware that we could use ESSER for special education as well.
Okay.
And Vicki says same as with Robin. Yes, we are aware of the recovery plan and will be part of the recovery team. Definitely concerned about who will provide the services. It was presented as coming through CFP and thus not for special education purposes.
Interesting.
Okay. And then,
we have some communications and messaging that we need to do. ESSER is not tied to CFP at all. They're entirely separate funding sources, and the recovery plan is intended to be a district effort, right? So we were talking, Jackie, last week in our leadership sort of strategic planning, identifying that special education probably needed targeted above and beyond supports, but as part of the recovery planning. Yeah. Claire, did you have a comment and something you want to weigh in on?
I do. my issue and what I think may be some of the caution coming from the business managers is how does all this extra funding that can now be used to kind of beef up special ed, you know, I guess there's got to be a discussion or at least a plan around not messing with your maintenance of effort
Yes.
that you had pre all this money pre-COVID, because from what I understand, once the shutdown happened, a lot of LEAs did not spend as, you know, as much as they used to. For example, transportation, we're just not transporting anybody, right? So if that was part of my budget for maintenance of effort, that would be something that I did not spend. And so this money being used for like special ed staff that you've already allocated towards your grant, my assumption is that this would have to go to funds above and beyond their salary, above and beyond their benefits, or like you say, hiring new people, right? Because you've got to protect the spending that you've been locked into for the grant, right? The state and local funds that you're supposed to keep spending over and over and over again, you know, to maintain your effort for your IDEA grant. So that may be where some of the business manager, you know, concern is, because, you know, you've got to keep those two things kind of running parallel tracks. So I'm just throwing it out there as a question, and then, you know, as a suggestion as to why this is going to be hard to plan how you're going to spend it.
Yeah, Claire, you raised a really, really important point, and you kind of teed me up really nicely, so thank you. One thing that we do want to emphasize is that we need to maximize all federal funds, right? So we do not want to be leaving money on the table in sort of our regular federal funding as well. And so an additional piece of guidance that you can expect from us to be coming out again very quickly is it's a federal funding planning document or guidance document. I'm going to warn you, it's a beast. It's many, many pages, but we've built it around the 3 buckets of recovery work, and then sort of anticipated needs, right? So if we need assistive technology, and there's a description of the need, and then we've identified each set of federal funds that you could use to pay for it. So, you know, it would fall under IDEA if it's on a student's IEP. It would fall under, you know, Title III. I don't know that it falls under Title III. Don't hold me to that. It would fall under ESSER. So for each need, you can go in and cross-reference, you know, which funding source can I look for here? And this is definitely where that strategic planning comes in. I would say we're in a different world right now. We've got a lot of money coming in. We're maybe used to being siloed, and right now there's a real need to be very collaborative. The way that I think about this, so this is me just sort of musing and giving my opinions a little bit, is that if you have your recovery team working and they're developing the recovery plan, I would, and I hope to actually release this document, I just need to get sort of the sign off, but I would have for each activity in the next, you know, cell over in the spreadsheet, what is the funding source, what is the, you know, limits on that funding source, what is the period of performance, et cetera, et cetera. So as you're working through the recovery planning, which is sort of a 1 to 2 year plan, how are you going to identify the funding sources for it? And so to do that, I think you probably need everybody at the table. You know, I don't know how the business managers can handle that sort of on their own without knowing what the need is. But yeah.
Jill, before moving off of maintenance of effort, I'm just wondering if Jen Perry, if you have any insights, and do we know if there's any waivers for this year forecasted?
Thank you, Jackie. I attended a webinar from the CIPHER who guide us according to the federal guidelines. There are no waivers. All the states are going through the same trials because so many LEAs will not meet MOE this year based on that bubble. Additionally, I have not recalculated our states yet because the folks that are updating the last year's final SEER report are doing that when they're doing the March ones, which are due March 15th. So once I hear that all of the revisions from June are done, I'll do that recalculation. But yes, I just want to echo exactly what Claire said and be very careful about maintaining that cost. And the other thing I wanted to echo what Jill said was these are costs expected to be above and beyond and not ongoing, that as Jill pointed out, that maybe eventually they can be put into IDEA after the grant period is over. Do you have anything else for me before I mute?
Not yet. A couple more things in the chat. Another Kara saying, yes, involved as part of the recovery team. I think we are working to figure out what we need to recover for all students prior to talking specifically about the recovery for students on IEPs. Same case with Springfield. Robin's asking, can funds be used for compensatory education? Shelley says that would be great to get that SR2 info directly. Allison, our building principals are concerned about having committed funds, approved recovery plans before the summer months to guarantee we can offer robust summer programming without dipping into local funds. Kelly says traditionally ESY has been about maintenance of skills over the summer. However, with the learning gap that has occurred from the pandemic, do we need to differentiate sessions for ESY and summer recovery services if both programs are running simultaneously? And then finally, it's really hard to meet MOE when we could not fill positions this year due to COVID.
So a couple of those I can address, and then a couple I think are not for me. In terms of compensatory services, the answer is yes, that is allowable under ESSER. And is identified in kind of the planning document that I'll be sending out. In terms of the question about facilities, this is one that we are engaging with right now. The caution here is that you are bound to follow all of the usual procurement regulations that you would for any other federal fund. The only exception that we've experienced with that was the CRF funds, which were through Treasury. So it was a different set of regulations, and there was sort of emergency sole procurement on that, or not sole procurement, but emergency procurement. For facilities projects, like the big ones that sort of meet a threshold, we do caution LEAs that you do need to get prior approval. Cassandra Ryan is your go-to on all facilities questions right now. She is by far the person in AOE with the most expertise on this, and she is in a constant dialogue with USED right now, sort of getting really clear understanding of what the requirements are. So those are the couple things that I would caution. ESSER2 is a good use for those, and that is one of the other sort of strategic uses, kind of non-recurring costs. So one thing that I think I heard from one superintendent is that they needed to take a space that wasn't being used and refurbish it specifically for their students who had IEPs that needed to be in a very specific kind of space. I don't know what the context was, so apologies on that. And in order to meet the health guidelines. And so ESSER is absolutely, there is a clear COVID context for that and COVID need to refurbish that space in order to meet health guidelines and get students back for in-person learning. So that is absolutely an allowable cost. You just want to make sure that you are following all of the usual kind of regulations in procurement. And there's a section of that in that guidance with Cassandra's contact information and kind of her blurb about it. And we want people to be thinking about doing the kinds of facilities work that will allow in-person learning. So yes, please, and please reach out to Cassandra Ryan on that.
Jill, what is required in terms of reporting requirements? You know, by taking this allocation of money, what is going to be the expectation of the documentation or the tracking or any type of formative or summative reports that are necessary? What does that look like?
It's hard to say, Jackie, and I really wish that I had clear answers for you. So we've gone through the first round of annual reporting to US Ed. It only went from March to September 30th of 2020, so we didn't have much to report because no one had really applied by then. What we do know is, I can actually pull it up. I was just sharing it with someone else today, so bear with me 1 second. Here's what I do know will be required, and unfortunately, it's not the kind of thing that's like you know, it doesn't track to an object code nicely. In terms of the summative and formative assessments, that may be a piece in ESSER 2, but we have zero idea right now about what that reporting is going to look like. And I hate to say that because I know that's frustrating, because how can you start collecting the data? We know that there is some reporting requirements around technology. So did the LEA use ESSER funds to provide internet access? Did the LEA use ESSER funds to purchase hardware or software? Did the LEA use ESSER funds to develop, initiate, or implement remote learning? And then there's sort of like which methods or which uses: submission of assignments, participation, outreach. So all of this is things that I am in the process of gathering into a guidance document that can be digestible. Right now it's not. But it is something that I have on my to-do list to get out in the next like 3 weeks or so. So I will at least be able to provide that. What any additional requirements are, it's not a performance grant. So you do not have to, like, you know, demonstrate that it doesn't have a lot of results-based accountability built into it, to be quite honest. So we don't know though with ESSER 2, what is it? Just a narrative that LEAs provide? We use the funds to develop data reporting methods and this to assess learning loss, and then we put these programs in place. We don't know what that looks like yet, and I'm sorry to say that. That's not helpful, but that's where we're at. But I will be getting out what we do know as soon as possible.
Other thoughts or comments, questions? Is there additional information that would be beneficial at this time as these guidance documents are coming out?
And what I will say is, when we release them, if that generates questions, please send them in. Yeah, and honestly, we've been fielding a lot more questions about ESSER, and it's really very helpful in targeting and clarifying our communications. So we welcome those questions. So please send them in.
That's good. And thank you, Vicki said this has been really helpful, and yeah, definitely. Thank you, Jill. Just so important. I know so many of you are at the table. We just wanted you to have the latest in terms of what the numbers look like, that we're projecting that even larger package coming forward. Oh, Katie says, can we make certain we receive the guidance documents directly? Thank you so much for all this. I'll do what I did with the recovery plan and some of the other documents, the things that go out to the superintendents. I'm happy to send through the listserv, so you get direct access to them. I'm sure Jill will inform me when they're available, and I'll make sure that you're aware and get them to you through that way.
And just putting in a plug here, because I feel like I say it a lot to the superintendents and the business managers, but I don't always get another audience. There is on the AOE website a federal funds page, and if you go to it, it's COVID-19 federal emergency funds. If you go to it, it links to every single one of the programs that we just discussed here today. So right now the ESSER 2 is a little bare bones because I haven't had much to put in there, but it's coming and will be up there. So you can dive in there right now. If you go on the ESSER webpage, there's just loads and loads and loads of guidance documents. I'm being attacked by one of my small people behind me, so apologies for that. Thank you, sweetheart. They were out in the sunshine. So that is a resource that you have available to you. So you don't need to, and we always post all the new guidance there. So you can find it that way.
Awesome. People are saying thank you, and Jill BriggsCampell, I'm saying you're the best. Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Claire. Thanks for everyone being here. This buckle up.
Yeah, thanks, Jill.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you all for the time. I really do hope this was helpful. I know it's a lot. It feels like a blast of information at your face, and more is to come. And yeah, I just really encourage folks to, as Jackie said, be at the table and be part of the planning process as best you can. I think this is one of those efforts where there's so much opportunity with these funds that we could do something pretty incredible with it. But your voices have to be at the table, I think.
Yeah, so. And feel free to reach out and bounce off any ideas that you have. We're in this together. We're figuring it out together, and we might have some insights, but don't hesitate to reach out and just bounce my ideas off of us.
If you have a good idea that you think, please run it by us. Share it with us. Definitely.
Awesome.
Okay.
All right, everybody, thank you so much for being here. I'm going to stop recording, and we'll make this information available to you in the very near future.
All right. Thank you all very much. Have a good one. Enjoy the sunshine.